Так, значит, я представлю Александра по-русски, а потом мы продолжаем по-английски, если я правильно понимаю. Дискуссия может быть по-русски. Значит, я очень рада представить вам Александра Скидана, который редко слишком, с моей точки зрения, выступает в Москве. Александр – поэт, критик, эссеист и переводчик. Его профессиональная деятельность здесь зафиксирована как оператор газовой котельной с 1985 по 2002 год, а в настоящее время редактор отдела «Практика» журнала «Новое литературное обозрение». Он автор многих поэтических книг, сборников эссе. Он лауреат премии «Мост» за лучшую статью о поэзии, лауреат премии Андрея Белого в номинации «Поэзия» в 2006 году. И, кроме того, он участник рабочей группы «Что делать?». И доклад, который мы сегодня услышим, называется «Гегемония и контргегемония в культурном поле. Переосмысляя русскую, модернистскую и нонконформистскую литературу».
Does it work? Is it okay? Can you hear me? Fine. Thank you for coming. I hope it will be worthy for you and for me as well to discuss the announced topic, which probably could seem a bit odd from the first glance and even irrelevant, taking into account the social unrest and mass mobilization which take place right now in Moscow, and not only in Moscow. But I believe to show you that the notion of hegemony and counter-hegemony, specifically in the cultural field, is crucial to comprehend fully what's going on right now in Russia, and which is probably even more important, underlie the dispositive of the power relations, which, in my view, couldn't be reduced to the state authority versus opposition dichotomy. It's much more complicated and subtle, and I will try to show you why and what consequences comes out from this sophisticated composition of different forces involved in this social upheaval. And not to be too abstract and theoretical, let me start with a very simple example. Just yesterday, a branch of Moscow poets who represent themselves as oppositional organized a poetry readings and march from Osip Mandelstam's monument to Kudrinskaya Square. When I read about this event yesterday morning in the internet, I immediately became interested why Osip Mandelstam's monument. And I searched in the internet, read some blogs and sources, and realized from the correspondence of the organizers of these oppositional poetry readings that there was a suggestion to organize them at the first place at the Mayakovsky's monument. But, as one of the organizers remarked, it is already marked as a leftist place. So, we, opposition, should find the other place, as much symbolic as Mayakovsky's monument. Isn't it symptomatic and telling? Yes. So this is just a kind of epigraph, right, to my topic, to my paper. Why power relations couldn't be reduced to this duality of the state authority, repressive, corrupted, and so on, so blah, 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 and some kind of obscure, but notwithstanding this obscurity and subdivisions inside oppositional movement. Here I should refer to Italian Marxist Antonio Gramsci, who profoundly, in a very productive way, reconsidered and revoked the notion of the hegemony, first to be conceptualized in Marx and then basically by Lenin, Trotsky and Bukharin. During his imprisonment, just a few words for you to have a picture of who Gramsci is. He was one of the leaders of socialist revolutionary workers movement in Italy, and he visited Soviet Russia in the early 20s, being a representative of the Comintern Executive Committee. He met Lenin and published several translations of Lenin in Italy in the magazine which he ran at the time. Anyway, so the contribution of Antonio Gramsci to neo-Marxist theory is enormous, and let me dwell a few minutes on this heritage, because it's really important to realize his input and the reconfiguration of the whole historical materialism, or philosophy of praxis, as he himself referred to in the prison, not only because of the censorship he couldn't mention during Mussolini's time to Marxism openly, and in his diaries and notebooks he termed it philosophy of praxis, but also it's very profound notion, I think, philosophy of praxis, because theory, as I already tried to let you realize, theory and praxis, abstraction, speculation, and everyday habitus are intertwined and couldn't be divided. So we should, all the time, we should go back and forth between them, not to be blind and to be prepared, right? To involve the newest experience into the theory and then back bring and reconceptualize theory because of this experience, right? So Gramsci reworked the notion of hegemony, which in Marx and a bit less, but still in Lenin, was too much economically, politically bounded, or reduced to economy, or in Marxian terms, infrastructure or base. You know, this famous division into base and superstructure. Basis и надстройка. Yes? So the stress, both in Marx and Lenin, was on the economical dynamics, which is antagonistic. The main antagonism is between labor and capital, and when this antagonism on the level of the base or infrastructure get to the highest point, then the changes, revolutionary changes, should occur, right? But already in Lenin's work, What is to be Done, the stress is a bit displaced to non-economical issues, namely superstructural effects and dynamics. Lenin developed the notion of the revolutionary party as an avant-garde of the proletariat, which should propagate and bring enlightenment to the proletarian masses, to engage these masses into the revolutionary class struggle, which again is much more subtle and complicated issue than simply class struggle inside the economical framework, at the factories or through trade unions, so on and so forth. Because this leadership, even in this restricted Leninist framework, means some kind of process of gaining this revolutionary consciousness. What happened in the Europe and what Antonio Gramsci himself witnessed? He witnessed the defeat of the revolutionary working class uprising everywhere, in Hungary, in Germany, and in Italy. In Italy, it was a particular case when, during the liberal bourgeois parliament republic, workers occupied factories. And there were only one step, or it seems that it was only one step, to overthrow the government and to take the power. But those revolutionary workers accepted the program the liberal reformist bourgeois parliament leaders provided them. And they left the factories. So Gramscian question was, why it is not enough to realize your economical and even political interests? Why you need something else to go on with the revolutionary process? Here we come to the main point, that power is structured not in a very simple way. Besides the repressive state apparatus, police, army, legislative system, bureaucracy, and so on and so forth, there is what Louis Althusser later would call, with the reference to Gramsci, as ideological state apparatuses. It's a whole nexus on net, including school, universities, religion, aesthetics, philosophy, everyday practices, and so on and so forth. This ideological configuration, which operates in such a way as to submit or subjugate and neutralize any kind of resistance, to make oppressed being ready to submit. And again, here I would like to stress that this question of state ideological apparatuses couldn't be reduced again to the notion of consciousizing thing and revolutionizing your own consciousness, or revolutionizing of the consciousness of the oppressed or subaltern group. It's more complicated. Gramsci himself paid a lot of attention to linguistics, to theater, to literature, trying to realize how through the cultural production this particular submissive consciousness is produced, prefiguring a lot of what later Althusser and other neo-Marxists, including Frankfurt School philosophers, would write about, right? Again, here an example would be illuminating. For example, in the second half of the 19th century, right after the Italy was united, because before it was like a country divided into several countries, right, with the different dialects and the different capitals and so on and so forth. Even with different economical and political systems, if you compare the more or less industrial developed north of Italy with Turin and Milan as the biggest cities, and agricultural, rural, basically rural south. And Gramsci, even before his imprisonment and visiting Russia, he wrote about the question of what national language should be in Italy. For example, one of the famous Italian writers, Mazzoni, who was a member of a bourgeois parliament, suggested to make a Florence dialect the national one, to which other intellectuals argue that only 3% of the population speaks this Florence dialect, and these 3% are elite, intellectuals and aristocracy. So even here, in the very concrete example, you can see how the notion of hegemony arises. Which dialect among several, and there were more than 10 in Italy at the time, we should choose? Which should be national? Which should be dominant? So, against Leninist notion of hegemony in a pure political sense as a recognized leading position in the class alliances, Gramsci introduced this cultural, political notion of hegemony as a very complicated system of coercion without direct brutal, open repression. How make people accept the status quo, the established order, to obey the established order. Not just police, army, and law would make you obey, but the ideology and the ideological apparatuses, starting from the very beginning, the school and the high school and the religion and family and so on and so forth. Now let me move to my main topic. I think that literature, and particularly modernist, high modernist, and avant-garde literature and poetry produced in the 20th century is crucial to the comprehension of how this ideological hegemonical and counter-hegemonical dispositif is structured. For better or for worse, literature is still at the center of ideological production in post-Soviet Russian condition. I think so. Even if we acknowledge, of course, the powerful influence of new media, visual art and visual studies and so on and so forth, still education starts with what we call classical canonical Russian literature. Here, again, I must go a bit back into the 90s to clarify what I mean here and now in our post-Soviet condition by hegemonical and counter-hegemonical cultural forces. In the abstract I wrote, I mentioned 4 names: Андрей Платонов, Варлам Шаламов, Осип Мандельштам и Маяковский. I will dwell on Mandelstam in more details in a minute, but let me start with the more simple cases, like Mayakovsky, for instance. And from the very beginning, I must say that for me, like to lay cards down openly from the very beginning, that for me, what is most important, not only in those 4 writers, but generally in the high modernist and avant-garde Russian tradition, is their utopian potentiality and messianic agenda, which we should kind of reclaim. Why reclaim? Because, again, as I stated in the abstract, already during Perestroika, this avant-garde and modernist heritage was reinterpreted and reappropriated by the liberal hegemonical cultural strata. They were read basically as the victims of the Soviet regime and as the powerful testimony against the communist project as such. The argument, the liberal intelligentsia argument, went and still goes like, well, we appreciate early Mayakovsky, but after his engagement with revolution, after he became a voice of revolution, after 1917, he simply became corrupted, and his poetry afterwards is not worthy anymore. His best poetry is before revolution. So, what would be mine or counter-hegemonical argument? I suggest to say that, well, but Mayakovsky, even before 1917, was already engaged leftist poet, who in his long poems as well as in a shorter, was directly attacking the common sense, bourgeois beliefs, bourgeois habitus, and the form of reign, if you will, right? Second, but let's read closely what he really did after 1917. I would mention the poem, long poem, like «Хорошо», «good», «люблю», «I love», «Во весь голос», with a full voice, which are absolutely great poetry. And there are many other smaller poems like Сергею Есенину, to Сергей Есенин, товарищу Нетте, пароходу человека, to the comrade Nette, a ship and a human being, and well, many others, starting from the very famous, still classical, from the school program poem «Хорошее отношение к лошадям», a good attitude toward horses, written in 1918. So my point is that it is not so much a question of political engagement as a question of our own stance, our own attitude, both aesthetic and political. Again, these intertwined dimensions are inseparable. But my main argument with Mayakovsky would be to refer you to two big poems, one called The Fourth and the second, The Fifth International. They're not well known, but they're absolutely great, and there he sharply critiqued the degradation of the revolution and it becoming bourgeois, and he portrayed the transformation of the revolutionary dynamics as a betrayal, which is very crucial to keep in mind. This kind of self-criticism, which is both addressing the powers to be and he himself, which I see as one of the crucial ingredients of the preserving the socialist communist hope as a horizon. Then let's take Platonov, whom liberal intelligentsia depicted as the greatest grotesque anti-communist writer who was banned by Stalin himself. But notwithstanding that he, in fact, yes, was censored, and few of his main masterpieces were out of print from late 20s till late 80s, if you go closer even to such a seemingly anti-communist short novel as Kotlovan, what it is in English, Marta, is it some kind of pit? Kotlovan, Andrei Platonov's short novel. Okay, where proletarians are digging a pit to construct under a kind of commune which will welcome all the people living in the village. It's a very famous one. So the point is that at a certain moment they should bury the young girl, which is a kind of sacrifice, and so the hegemonical interpretation would be, what a horrible thing they do. Okay, the more subtle reading would say, well, their hopes are great, but in reality all this failed. It's just atrocity which they produce. Again, against this, we should oppose more close reading, which is always much more complex and ambivalent. And again, as with Mayakovsky, it involves self-criticism of the dynamics involved in the historical process. Platonov, as any other Soviet writer, hold on this communist horizon as a brotherhood on a very poor condition. He's kind of deviated from the orthodox Marxist-Leninist restricted view, of course, but still his horizon is absolutely and unequivocally communist. And I would even suggest that his version of communism is really transgressive and still waiting for the equal severe comprehension. Quite the same goes to Shalamov, who was actually a pupil of Sergei Tretьяков, productionist and a member of Lev and New Lev group, and the inventor of factography, or this version of non-fictional documentary writing and making movie, which is very productive strategy. And even if Shalamov in his youth rejected some notions suggested by his teacher, he in his later writings arrived to a very similar notion of non-fictional literature as a documentary kind of approach toward most unbearable things. Unbearable in the sense that what he depicts is the conditions where human beings stop to be human. And of course, it is very easy to use this depiction again as a death sentence to the communist project, because it's very simple logic. Communism is about gulag. That's it. Everything is clear. Let's go to consume. So this two-step logic is still hegemonic, right? So how to oppose it. That's my issue, and probably this brief depiction of 3 cases is not enough. So that's why I prepared a bit more detailed, close reading of Mandelstam's late poem, written in the January-February 1937, at the height of the mass repressions, as you know. And in this poem, Mandelstam is saying farewell to ancient tragedy. You should keep in mind that less than 2 years later, he would perish in a transit prison camp near Vladivostok. I will read it first in Russian. It's really a great poem, and a communist poem, as I would try to show you in a minute. Где связанный и пригвожденный стон, где Прометей, скалы, подспорья и пособия, а коршун где, и желтоглазый гон его когтей, летящий из-под лобья. Тому не быть, трагедии не вернуть, но эти наступающие губы, но эти губы вводят прямо в суть Эсхила грузчика, Софокла лесоруба. Он эхо и привет, он веха, нет, лемех, воздушно-каменный театр времен растущих встал на ноги, и все хотят увидеть всех, рожденных, гибельных и смерти неимущих. So in English, and sorry for my pronunciation, because it's hard to talk in English actually, not being British or American or Australian, but it's even harder to read a Russian poem in English. Where is the chained and nailed down moan? Where is Prometheus, supporter and abatter of cliffs? And where the kite and the yellow-eyed heat of his claws flying out from sullen brows? That is not to be. Tragedies cannot be returned. But these advancing lips, but these lips lead straight into the essence of Aeschylus the lauder, of Sophocles the woodcutter. His echo and greeting, his milestone, no plowshare, the aerial stone theatre of growing times has risen to its feet, and all want to see everyone, the ones who were born, the fatal ones, the ones deprived of death. As in most of Mandelstam's late poems, the semantic fabric here is excessive and simultaneously obscure, filled with hiatuses, missing links, and associative leaps from one unknown to another. It is unclear, for instance, whose lips are referred to. We might assume that they belong to an actor declaiming the tragedy Prometheus bound by Aeschylus, but this is merely our rationalizing, realistic guess, a guess unsupported by factual evidence. But meanwhile, these lips, repeated twice and advancing, bristling with the doubled adversative conjunction but, are extremely vital to the poem. In these 2 lines, it literally breaks in half, leading us into the essence of a historically irreversible shift. Essentially, we are in state of ignorance. What is more, we remain in this state when confronted with the pronoun he, or in Russian original it, that opens the 3rd quatrain. Who is this? Is Hyllus author of Prometheus Bound, or Sophocles author of Oedipus Rex, or perhaps Prometheus? This is conceivable from the purely grammatical point of view. Or is it the kite? Certain scholars argue that it is Stalin, insofar as the poem was written the same month as the notorious so-called Ode to Stalin. It is written in the same meter and contains variations of similar motifs. In particular, there is a reference to Prometheus in the Ode to Stalin, with whom both Josephs, the tyrant and the poet, are alternately identified. If we pursue this line of argument, then the advancing leaps are his as well. In the Ode, the supreme leader and father of all peoples appears speaking from a podium, but the pronoun he might also refer in original Russian to the aerial stone theater. Он, местоимение он in Russian, it could both refer to he, she, they, oh no, he, she, or it. In the next line, this is the ancient theater as suggested by echo and greeting. The uncertainty principle is constitutive here. The poem does not simply presume a multitude of readings. Its meanings and significance are unreadable in their own right, in isolation from the many other poems written during the same period, and more broadly from the poet's entire creative trajectory, which also includes his own death with a crowd and wholesale, to quote verses on an unknown soldier. The poem's syntax, the syntax of the chained and nailed down mourn, is out of joint, just as the time of tragedy is out of joint. It has been severed and mounted on a plowshare, which opens up a perspective in which the tires of the ancient Greek amphitheater and the serried ranks of the Last Judgment, as depicted in old Russian icons, converge. The eschatological perspective of immortality. In turn, this perspective is unthinkable without the communist perspective, the redemption of humanity's curse as a species, namely the division of labor. It is unthinkable without this sting-like hyphen, deadly for art and thus for tragedy as well, that secures the transfiguration of Aeschylus into a loader and Sophocles into a woodcutter. Without this line drawn under art itself, the line that resurrects the proletarian within the artist, and vice versa, the artist within the proletarian. Proletarians of all lands and fire-encircled centuries rise to their feet along with the tilted bowl of what once was the theater, as a model of the art, right? This is the Horus. In modern tragedy, it is Horus that perishes, not the hero. The Horus is singing the Varshavianka and the International, as I read on the lips of Mandelstam, the woodcutter, as he reads Aeschylus. So, for me, the crucial point in the poem is, I am just trying to stress this point because it's really like communist, but not in a simplicit way. Why communist? Because here he not just questioned this borderline between intellectual, writer, and artist, as embodied in the figures of great ancient Greek authors, and the proletarian, woodcutter and loader. So, and it is materially realized in the poem through this hyphen, дефис, потому что он соединяет имя авторов греческой трагедии с дровосеком и грузчиком. Это как бы пишется в одно слово. It is like he's producing through this hyphen, like in German language you can like make a long new word through like 3 or 4 nominative, right? So Mandelstam is doing the same, destroying this border and division of labor, which is crucial for exploitation for the surplus value production, right? So, and why I also write here about Warszawianka and International. You know that in contrast to post-Soviet or Soviet, in that matter, liberal intelligentsia reading of Mandelstam as simply a victim of the Stalinist regime, his German translator, Paul Celan, looked much more deeper. He profoundly grasped the Mandelstamian notion of antagonistic, tragic, historical change happened in 1917 by writing a poem and making a broadcast about Mandelstam notion of revolution. So the 3 lines from Celan's poem goes like this: Und wir sangen die Warszawianka mit verschifften Lippen Petrarca in Tundra Ochran Petrarca. In English, it's in English translation, it would be sorry. And we sang the Warszawianka with reed-choked lips Petrarca in tundra ears Petrarca. So what Celan is doing here, to come to comprehend what he's really doing, first I will quote from his broadcast on Mandelstam in 1960. So I will read the full footnote on this translation. It is 3 lines are taken from a poem from Paul Celan's collection Die Niemandroos, whose dedication reads, Dem Andanken Osip Mandelstam, in memory of Osip Mandelstam. Mandelstam was born in Warsaw, and legend has it that he read his translations of Petrarch to other prison camp inmates. Celan prolifically and congenially translated Mandelstam's verse, and his own poems contain a fair number of references to the poetry and fate of his Russian and Jewish colleague. Celan's profound and frankly unorthodox understanding of Mandelstam's poetics is borne out by the text of a radio program broadcast on March 19, 1960, in which, in particular, Celan said, for Mandelstam, and this evinces a chiastic character particular to Russian thought, revolution is the down of the other, the uprising of those below, the exaltation of the creature, an upheaval of downright cosmic proportions. It unhinges the world. And I quote Celan from Pierre Géry's translation into English. We are coming to end. What must be added? So we can't pretend to attack the unjust order simply by frontal mobilization. The state authority is in itself divided into oppressive state apparatuses and ideological state apparatuses, which are constructed in a much more subtle and controversial way, which we should deal with, not being blinded by this seeming simplicity. And the cultural wars, even amidst the social upheaval, shouldn't prevent us from thinking our revolutionary messianic promise, which is embodied in the great literature and poetry, which I see as a crucial moment of the clash between liberal hegemonic and leftist counter-hegemonic politics. Finally, as you could see from this close reading of small Mandelstam poem, uncertainty principle is involved there. It's risky. It's as risky to take a step of interpretation as go to the square to demonstrate your oppositional attitude or stance. But even more difficult and risky is to try to link each dimension, each field to each other. And this sophisticated structure of poetry, for me, is the other very important issue which lead to Walter Benjamin's again very unorthodox understanding of progressive or politicized art. In his work, Author as a Producer, he make a very strange statement about such art, which from the first glance could sound very odd. And with this quote, I would like to finish my presentation and to allow you to make questions and discuss the topic. The quote goes: "The political line alone cannot agonize." He speaks about work of art. Keep in mind, the political line alone cannot agonize. The excellent Lichtenberg has said, it doesn't matter what opinions someone has, but what kind of a man these opinions make of him. Now, a great deal depends on one's opinion, but the best opinions won't help if they don't make something useful out of the person who holds them. The best political tendency in the work of art is phasal, when it doesn't indicate the attitude with which one should approach it for the The best political tendency is phasal when it doesn't indicate the attitude with which one should approach it. For the writer can only indicate this attitude when he makes something, namely something written. The tendency is the necessary but never sufficient condition of the organizational function of a work. The tendency also demands an exemplary, indicative performance from the writer. Today, more than ever before, that should be demanded. And now, the most important fragment. An author who teaches a writer nothing teaches nobody anything. The determinant factor is the exemplary character of a production that enables it. First, to lead other producers to this production, and secondly, to present them with an improved apparatus for their use. And this apparatus is better to the degree that it leads consumers to production, in short, that it is capable of making co-workers out of readers or spectators. По-русски Бенямин говорит, что одной правильной политической тенденции недостаточно. Вопрос в технике или в том, что он называет аппаратом производства. Или, чуть-чуть упрощая, можно говорить там, по-русски на языке 20-х годов, на языке производственников и конструктивистов, в технике письма. И Беньямин делает парадоксальное заявление а эта работа была им прочитана в качестве доклада в Париже уже, когда он бежал из Германии гитлеровской, в социальном колледже. И для, собственно, этой ситуации, когда, собственно, левая литература и искусство воспринимаются в этом месте как нечто само собой разумеющееся, он делает совершенно парадоксальное заявление, что писатель, который ничему не учит других писателей, и никого, и простых читателей не сможет ничему научить, какой бы правильной ни была политическая тенденция или политическая линия в его произведении. Равно речь идет о художественном произведении, о романе, о стихотворении и так далее. Именно поэтому я и взял такой сложнейший кейс, да, как вот это очень сложное, более чем двусмысленное стихотворение Мандельштама, которое расплести все подтексты которого это крайне сложно. Но эта сложность, this complexity of Mandelstam and other high modernist poets who, for me, in my view, preserve this communist horizon as even if in implicit, non-articulated, openly way, is not just challenging, but it's an equivalent of the risk which all of us exercise or experiment in our everyday practices right now, amidst this social upheaval. I'm finished. Thank you for your attention. I hope my English wasn't that horrible. Marta.
Maybe I'll give the word first to some of you who have some. Sorry. So I have my own questions, of course, but I'm turning first to the audience. Maybe some of you has some urgent questions or reactions. I hope so very much. Is there any?
Probably I should add, of course, and I should probably said it from the very beginning, that of course it is not enough to reduce yourself to this highbrow intellectual, like close readings, or simply producing artifacts or even art practices are not enough. I must stress from the very beginning that this activity should be counterbalanced by producing alternative spaces, alternative institutions, and at the same time by what is called entryism. So, and I can give an examples of this counter-hegemonic alternative space producing and counter-hegemonical politics. I think that Free Marxist publishing house founded by Kirill Medvedev is the great example of this counter-hegemonical trend. And then Leningrad-based literary magazine called Translit, founded by Pavel Arseniev, who will talk here in a few days. And then, of course, What is to be done group, member of each, I myself, is from 2003. It's very different examples, but I think together they produce this this kind of non-direct, non-frontal attack during which is which already has its aftermath, after effects And then entrism, of course, what I'm trying to do in the liberal, basically, magazine called New Literary Observer, sponsored, of course, as you know, by Mikhail Prokhorov, is to publish the leftist stuff, the same Kirill Medvedev's poetry and Arsenyev's articles, Pavel Arsenyev's articles and other stuff. And so together, all this produced something which helped to move, to shift the situation. Of course, I'm not mentioning everything because it's impossible to list everything, what is going on.
Я приглашаю также вопросы задавать по-русски, если у кого-то они назрели. I didn't actually understand how I have many questions concerning Mandelstam and concerning this liberal entrism, but I'm not really getting how you go from one to the other. So how suddenly this новое литературное обозрение suddenly emerged after this. So do you consider Mandelstam as someone who was using this strategy? I didn't get it. Yeah.
No. Mandelstam is the case. Well, probably I need more introduction to Mandelstam's case at large.
About Mandelstam, it's clear to me, although I have many questions. So you interpret him as a communist poet, and rightly so. And as you know, I'm doing similar things with art, and I've written a lot on the subject, so I'm very much in the topic. And we can speak about it for hours. It's a very interesting thing. But how do you go from there to the position of the contemporary intellectual in Russia?
Because Mandelstam's bottle, let's say, is only a small part of a long chain, but it's a crucial one, because Mandelstam is at the center of modernist canon. Students learn and teach him, and he's the legend and the icon of Soviet and post-Soviet intelligentsia, which interpreted him as a victim of the regime and
the icon of the anti-communism,
as the voice of anti-communism, of course. So I think that counter-hegemonic logic would be to struggle for Mandelstam, to struggle for Shalamov, Platonov, and other writers of the period to deconstruct this liberal interpretation.
And you propose to do it on two fronts, like an independent, as an independent publisher, and also by entering some of the hegemonic institutions.
Well, independent small publishing presses like Free Marxist Publishing House, founded by Kirill Medvedev, is doing other things. For example, they published leftist theory, cinema theory, and neo-Marxist theoreticians and critics like Terry Eagleton, but at the same time they publish translations of Pier Paolo Pasolini's poetry, reminding us that Pasolini was a member of Italian Communist Party, and he was a very, of course, controversial figure, but still a member of a communist party. And we here in Russia know a lot about his cinema, but nothing about his communist poetry. So Medvedev is himself translating.
Yeah, in Soviet Union, I still remember when I was very young, and the films of Pasolini were shown at the Illusion Film Theater in Moscow. They were shown because he was a member of Communist Party. So it was the reason for them to be shown, and for the other films, someone who maybe was not there. But it's completely forgotten. It's completely erased. The whole story. If we take these books of Soviet times, it's everything is there. I don't know about the poetry, maybe it was not published in Russian, but I'm amazed how they erased the facts. I must say that when I've recently been to Poland, one could say the same thing about Russia, but it's just I made a research about Władysław Strzemiński, who's an important Polish artist, actually raised in Russia and pupil of Malevich. And so I was studying his work, and I read some books. I read Polish, and I read some of the books which were published during communist times, where some of the things about Strzemiński were censored. And I read some of the books which are published now, when one would expect that the censorship would be abolished, but it's simply that the other things are now censored. You know, to get the full picture, you have to read both, one and the other, otherwise you're missing the point. So this kind of censorship of this communist past is of course taking place, we all know it. Until you're preparing your questions, I actually wanted to ask a lot about Mandelstam, but maybe this is more obvious. I'm very much, of course, interested by your last point about entering the liberal and even neoliberal institutions, since I'm also the one who's doing same thing at Open Space, and it makes me doubt very much about the effectiveness and the honesty of such a gesture. I actually simply wanted to ask you, as someone who's in the same situation, aren't you having problems? Because as many of you might know, we're now witnessing, Marta maybe does not, that we are witnessing a kind of course in a milder form, but a kind of McCarthyism towards people with left-wing ideas. For example, I'm teaching, I made a special course, spецкурс, which is called in Russian, a small course in Moscow State University. Sergei Khachaturov, who's a representative of the officials of the State University, just entered. And when I was supposed to, actually I'm teaching there for free. It's a voluntary job, I'm not getting anything. And it was planned like that from the beginning. But still they didn't want to accept my course because some of the people said, I quote, "She's a dangerous left liberal." Left liberal is considered being dangerous. I didn't tell them that I'm in worse, so I'm not just left liberal, I'm worse. But there is a kind of McCarthyism. So how's your life in LO?
I see the problems. There are many. I would never enter New Literary Observer magazine if I wouldn't before join What Is to Be Done group, because I know that I can do both things, and I think that it is not enough to enter some liberal institution and try to propagate their leftist ideas, but together with the other kind of activities, and together with other people doing the alternative spaces, publishing houses, when you participate in them, then it produces the chain of equivalence, what Chantal Mouffe and Laclau called chain of equivalence. If it would be only one thing, if I would be, for example, just a member of What Is to Be Done group and doing nothing in poetry, in my literary criticism, in publishing, that it wouldn't be enough. But all this cultural activity is not enough as well if you don't go to the street and join the protest. But together, in combination, this is what Antonio Gramsci called when the war of position, позиционная война переходит в маневренную, when the war of position transforms itself into the war of movement, because in the situation when the revolution are defeated, you can't organize a frontal attack against the regime. You can't even go on with the war of movement. So you can indirectly attack the regime from different points, locally. But when you produce the chain of equivalence, when you challenge the regime from different points, including the state ideological apparatuses, what is more, enter them and try to subvert, then as a whole, probably it makes sense. Otherwise, I am really doubtful.
Questions? Considerations? Вова, неужели тебя нет вопросов?
Мне?
Да.
У меня есть похвала. Я потому что счастлив, что вот в России кто-то наконец увлекся Грамши и стал использовать его как такую методику для анализа, чего не было.
Я бы заметил, что да, конечно, вот, кстати, в другом журнале, который выходит в новом литературном обозрении, как издательстве, это «Неприкосновенный запас», в прошлом году опубликована фундаментальная, очень важная, принципиальнейшая статья Луи Альтусера «Идеология и идеологические аппараты государства». В очень хорошем переводе, есть в сети. Вот. It's another example of this subversive entryism, because Ilya Kalinin is a leftist liberal in his worldview, but he is running this liberal or quasi-liberal magazine called «Неприкосновенный запас», which is part of a New Literary Review holding publishing house. And still he can publish their interviews with the members of What Is To Be Done group, or articles about Vayna group, or Althuserian great contribution to neo-Marxist theory. And in this Althuserian article, he refers several times to Gramsci, because Gramsci was, of course, pioneering this path toward displacement of the stress from economy to culture and to cultural production as the main tool of maintaining the status quo.
So we are very quickly rushing on the way of becoming a Western world where a left wing is a part of academic tradition in a very legitimate way, not being questioned. Magun already just had a conference in Kiev, and he was always telling, I'm an academic, it's very much okay for an academic to be left-wing. Nobody, even in Petersburg, nobody doubts about it, so I feel completely safe.
He's playing a good role, I think, by saying this, because his position both in European University and in Smolny College is very vulnerable, actually, because he's surrounded by well, not only liberals, but I would say right-wing liberals and conservatives there, and he's attacked. But more or less, he's survived. But I can say he's safe there.
Yeah, well, nobody's safe.
But
nobody's
he's
safe in
pretending
this
that.
country.
Well, by involving this logic, he wants to say to his colleagues that it's okay to be academic and to be leftist.
Yeah, but of course, by saying that, he and we all are doing that, he is referring to the West. Yeah, so yes. We still can use this argument of an imaginary West where it is being done this way. That's what I usually say. We have to be more left-wing, otherwise it's not okay. It's not considered like kosher, in an international context. So it's still an argument which can be used, but I think that in one generation it will not be possible anymore. So we still can have this capital of this, Western authority.
I much agree with you. And besides, as far as Magun as a figure is concerned, you should remember that he studied in the States And then in France, he is a pupil of La Coulabart, and he made PhD at La Coulabart. At Badiou attended this event. So for him, it's a bit different from my situation, for example, who never finished any university and had no any high education, whatsoever. So I can't, apply to this high rank academicians, as a model for my gabitus or my position. So my sources are different.
Я хочу добавить, что мне кажется, что вообще как бы Саша вносит большую новизну в наше представление исторически, в первую очередь, с которым по поводу там, русской литературы советского периода, с его, в общем, анализом я согласен в основном. И это, некая такая совершенно тенденция замечательная и плодотворная для нашего времени, и, я бы сказал, совершенно неожиданная для меня, что это вот возникло, и мне это очень приятно было слушать и понимать.
По-русски, по-английски говорится. Can you talk a little bit about contemporary fiction, or, well, be it sort of fiction or poetry in Russia that, in your view, kind of successfully create the kind of counter-hegemonic vibe in kind of a Gramscian sense, whether these works exist, be they explicitly political or not?
Right now, I think that there is a very promising, productive leftist constellation of different poets around Leningrad-based literary magazine called, or Almanac, Translit. I'm a member of the board there, of the board staff there, and I can mention Roman Asminkin as a poet and performer. Sometimes he performed together with the guitar player who produced this kind of internet noise transformation through computering, and it's sometimes involving this show business rhythm and bass kind of intervention, and Asminkin himself is dancing. So it's a very strong performance, and his poetry I value a lot. In the coming issue of New Literary Observer, there will be his long poem called a poem written after 7 days working constructing some fashionable cottage at the rural milieu near St. Petersburg somewhere. He is a real proletarian. He is working hard to get money. And then Pavel Arsenyev himself is a very different case. He is more oriented toward conceptualism, Prigov's strategies particularly. He take as a model some kind of recognizable poetical patterns, started to kind of mimic them, and then at a certain moment subvert or deconstruct. And he's like, it's a more intellectual way of poetry. I myself is writing poetry, and since late 90s, I think I'm doing this probably more sophisticated kind of collage, also poetry involving a lot of quotation through theory and politics, and it's more difficult to speak about fiction writers. But I could mention Pimenov, Dmitry Pimenov and Alexei Tsvetkov-mladший at that matter. Not so-called neo-realists like Zahar Prilepin, because that goes totally in contradiction with my view of how art and writing should be, because I think the part of the agenda of the leftist aesthetics and politics should be questioning of the status of position of reality. What is reality? How it is constructed? That's the task of the aesthetics to explore, right? To question. And when you simply try to, in your technique, try to coincide with the already pre-existing image of the reality, then sorry, it's not leftist, even if it is leftist in its tendency. Right? That's where we come to this Benjaminian quote. And of course, Kirill Medvedev is a great poet himself. And his story is very telling because, you know, when he was very young, he was recognized by the curators and publishers of new generation, like Kuzmin, Kukulin, and he was invited to, was apprised and published 2 books thanks to their interest. But then he pronounced his break with all this structure of producing and publishing and performing poetry because he regarded it as a bourgeois, as a very elitistic activity, and went out of the scene totally, and after a couple of years organized this independent free Marxist publishing house. And now he translated a lot, and now he came back with new poetry, which I found very powerful, because a new touch of self-irony and humor appeared there, which was absent in his early poetry. So he develops, he didn't stop, and that's what I like a lot in him. There are others, of course. Katie Chukrov, I would like to mention Katie Chukrov. Her book was published as a in a poetry book series founded by Translit Almanac and Free Marxist Publishing House. The series called Craft, and there Katie Chukrov published her long dialogical or kind of dramatical pieces, which are rhymed, but which kind of give voice to those who basically don't have any voice in not only in culture but in our everyday life. So, and she's trying to produce this confrontation between different voices, like very much in the wake of Aberiu dramatization of poetical discourse. But when she performed, she also, as a musician, displays this Aberiu pattern in a very inventive, interesting way. So her performance is also a strong thing. That's the branch of names I can give you.
И на самом деле я хотел сделать маленькое замечание, что мы, мы все движемся влево, но мы должны осторожно подходить к самому, не к тому, что идет движение влево, а в том, что определять себя как левыми, потому что в основном, на мой взгляд, просто идет движение такое либеральное, и я бы сказал, что левые должны выделиться. Левые должны выделиться, потому что сейчас левые очень смешаны с либералами. И, есть какие-то старые левые, типа Зюгановской партии.
Ну, это вопрос исторических, тактических и стратегических блоков, с кем блокироваться, потому что точно так же очень реально и правая угроза, что вообще перехвачен будет этот протест просто ультраправыми даже, которые, ну, по-своему очень даже организованы. И они более организованы, чем либералы, они более организованы, чем левые на сегодняшний момент.
Конечно, на самом деле, I'll switch to Russian in this moment. У меня нет такого впечатления, что левые смешаны с либералами. Наоборот, я хотела задать вопрос Саше, почему он все время подчеркивает, когда речь шла сейчас о counter-hegemonic strategy, но ты все время говорил, что he's leftist, although I wouldn't actually say about Dmitry Pimenov he's that much leftist, yeah, so that's not that obvious. And maybe it's not that important, I don't know. Is it what is more important, to be counter-hegemonic or to be leftist? And I actually feel that the Russian post-Soviet leftists are stressing all the time that they are leftist in a situation where somewhere in New York they wouldn't, for example, probably.
Yeah, here probably it's worth it to refer to another term, dominance, because I think that the dominant ideology actually is a kind of a strange mixture of state adolescence, patriotism, nationalism, racism, sexism, and kind of very strange mixture of this very conservative and sometimes socialist agendas. Yes? While liberal is hegemonic. That's the difference. The dominant, so leftist...
Liberal is hegemonic, but not dominant.
But through the strategic block with liberals, leftists could gain this hegemony. But when we speak about cultural production, there hegemony and dominance more or less are the same thing. It's liberal, I think. That's why
it is so.
Counter-hegemony is should be addressed to the liberal hegemony. That's how I see it. Well, if you take, of course, official TV, mass media, and other things, well, that's another story. But when it comes to culture, and literature, and poetry, and art, or particularly contemporary art, their liberal consensus is dominant.
Yes, yes, of course. Если еще какие-то вопросы, можно еще как-то закруглять нашу беседу. So I think that if there are no more questions, then thank you everybody, and see you next time on a lecture by Master Osman.
Thank you for your attention and participation.